So, chapter 11, it still felt like Irma was in the room as I pulled on yesterday's clothes and went down to my car. I sat there shivering until the heater rattled and creaked its way to life. Then I headed out into the morning toward I-25. It was nearly sunrise when I arrived back at the overpass where Irma was thrown over. There had to be a good reason why Irma had latched herself to me. I knew now that I didn't know as a kid my grandpa had been right. Some ghosts never even realize that I have this thing. The one who knows I can see and hear them are rarely strong enough to push themselves in. If they do, I dispatch them quickly. But some manage to break through. Those are the ones that want something to happen. They need something from you. It is a feeling you get like a ball in your stomach or that heartbeat that comes when you look over the edge of a cliff. Sometimes they fill you with prickly heat or smother you with coal until your muscle cramp. When I was younger and unable to control the channels that voices navigated, their presence would give me nosebleeds and the most tremendous pressure in. They preyed on my youth and my naive because they knew I hadn't learned to set boundaries. The one thing I couldn't do was ignore them. That was impossible. It was best to keep yourself healthy and strong because the voices knew to take advantage when you were sick or weak. Even small bouts of insomnia or the flu could trigger the switch. The dead would be waiting in line, glaring up at the neon sign outside my psych. The power never worked like you wanted it to. Earlier on in my time at the department, I had tried to find our leads on cold cases to see if the ghosts of the unsolved murders in the city had to get something off their chests. Back in 2003, the remains of 11 women were found west of town, up on the mesa that overlooked the city. I visited the site several times, just waiting for the ghost of one of the women who was buried in the mass grave to come and talk to me. I visited for years. Not one came. The killer was dubbed the West Mesa Collector, but was never captured by the police. There were two suspects in one case. One, the major suspect, living only 2 or 3 miles from where the women were found, was unalived by the boyfriend of the girl who had just RAPED and unalived and rolled into a piece of carpet. The other was a serial RAPIST police knew to be stalking prostitutes along Central Avenue. He received a life sentence for other crimes, but he never pinned to this one. What this work proved to me was the people were evil. The things I saw day after day were unthinkable, and the people who did these things sometimes still walk the streets. It was hard when you knew the truth but had no way to share it. No way to lead the police officer straight to an unaliver's door. If I told the department what I could do, they would surely fire me, maybe lock me up in the nearest mental hospital. My years on the job would be written off as I would be. Any would-be psychics or psychic detectives are quickly dismissed by the departments, accused of retrofitting facts and calling them visions. My visions couldn't be defined as a post-cognition like the psychics you see on television who can feel the past. I didn't feel their past, I felt their presence. I just relied on them to tell me what I needed to know. I had no control over who knocked on the door. Irma was powerful. She gave me back the headaches of my youth and the bright lights buried in my memories. She was able to pry into my weakness unlike any other being I had encountered. My mind was buzzing and looking to be anywhere else but the final moments of Irma Singleton. But there I was, standing on the overpass where she took her last breaths, watching the approaching cars rise between the lanes. Irma's fear and dread became my own. I began to feel the pressure building in my head. The busy sounds of the overpass were swallowed by a child's cry. In my mind, I could see Irma Singleton picking the little girl up and twirling her around from the other room, a voice, "You're going to be late." "I know, Mom," Irma answered. She carried the girl into the other room and I followed them. Irma kissed her mother on the cheek. "Thanks," she said. She pulled her leather purse to her shoulder. "I'll be right back, baby." Irma blew a kiss to the little girl and pulled the door shut, a slam that startled me into reality. I had never done that before, let someone draw me that close. I felt Irma as if I had been dropped into her own spirit. Even there on the overpass, I could smell her daughter's skin and toast burning in the kitchen. I took one more look over the overpass, the morning light turning dark, the wind rising up to my face. I still felt Irma at my back, as well as an urgency that raged hot. "Help me!" I heard Irma's screams getting louder and louder as I watched her fighting the giant. "Help me!" Her voice was in my ear. "Help me now!" It was my ringing cell phone that broke me from my meditation. "Rita, here. We're having a busy morning. Are you on a call?" Samuel's rustled papers in the background. "Damn it, I can't find the schedule. I don't know. What day is it?" My watch read 6:49 a.m. The sun was finally warming up the city. Irma still had her stomach in a ball and a mind at a tilt. I was disoriented and hyper-aware all at once. Someone filled the old Imperial Motel with holes. First reports and called it a drive-by. I think the lady is still alive, so it's not a fatality yet. But from what I understand, she's not doing well. Detective Garcia is heading it. Garcia again? After 30 years on the force, the man had absolutely no emotion or empathy. He was on just about all the fatality calls that I was on, and we didn't get along right from the beginning. His way was breaking the ice with me, had been to tell me his one Navajo joke. So these two East Coast hookers decided to move out to California. They're driving through New Mexico and stop at a little trading post. Garcia was already chuckling. There were two Indian women sitting out on the front porch. The four women started to talk, like women do. One Indian woman says, "Well, I'm Navajo and she's Arapaho." The one hooker said, "No shit. Well, I'm a New York hoe and she's a Chicago hoe." He had roared with laughter. When I didn't laugh, he muttered under the breath, "Women." Once when I was only a few months on the job, I watched Garcia take some money off a guy they had in custody. Police had found the body of a woman who had been RAPED and bludgeoned in her apartment. She had been decomposing there for at least 2 days while her unaliver sat in the living room and watched the television. When the police arrived after the woman's mother filed a missing person report, the unaliver was sitting there, eating a box of cereal next to her body. They emptied his pockets, a pack of cigarettes, a lighter, a knife, and a wad of money an inch thick. I snapped photos in the apartment, but I kept an eye on Garcia. After they bagged the woman and put her in the OMI van, Garcia stuffed the money and knife into his pockets. The smokes he shook until one slender stick came out of the pack. He used the guy's lighter too. Then he got into the car. I'll never forget that. 7:21 a.m. Imperial Motel, 1st and Central Avenue, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Drive-by shooting. I walked to the perimeter, happy to see that there were no bodies lying beneath white sheets. Garcia lumbered toward me, his industrial-strength cologne cutting through the cold air. The last time I'd seen him was on the overpass above Irma's dismembered body, his round, pocket face shining with sweat. Now he looked blue from the early morning light, choking for air above the straining button of his collar. "So where's the boss? He didn't tell me he was sending you." Sorry to disappoint, I replied. You know, he has better things to do than spend this morning with you. And Emma would have been better than spending any morning with this man. He drew me a bright blue set of rubber gloves. So are you waiting for an invitation or what? What happened here? I said, ignoring him. A young officer spoke up. From what we can tell, it looks like it might be some GANG activity. Have no leads, but shots were fired from a vehicle moving west to east, and we don't think our victim was the target. The Vic is in her early 20s. She's probably gonna make it, but she sure was a bleeder. The photos began outside. We counted and photographed over 300 pieces of evidence in 2 hours, including the 130 brass shells that were scattered between the thick yellow lines in the hotel parking lot, where a trail ran over 13 feet long before stopping abruptly, leaving a black skid mark. It must have sounded like a war zone, but that was what this town was becoming. I photographed a scene like this every month or so. Usually it was a kid involved in a GNG thing or a DRUG thing. Sometimes just an unlucky soul in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of it ever ended well. There was always a car wash somewhere in the city raising money for a young man or a woman's funeral. That and the plotting of revenge in someone's basement. The fact that she was a bleeder was an understatement. I could taste the blood in my mouth the second I came into the room. There were already seen investigators counting projectiles, property, dropping evidence markers. I took out my camera, my adhesive tape, and began to take pictures. So far, I counted over 50 evidence markers, and I could see more. I moved further into the scene. First, the establishing shot, the overview, then the corners. The flashes illuminated the 7 pools of blood on the floors, now hardened shells of glistening black. Along the walls, I could see the young woman's path from the floor to the nightstand, a 10-inch streak of blood that I marked with an evidence ruler. Her bloody fingerprints moving up toward the phone, the bloody 9-1 of her call. A pair of wings emerged from the wall behind the bed, the imprint of her bloody shoulder blades as I flashed image 88. I realized the victim must have sat here for a while, spilling the life from her body. The BLOOD on her bed measured a circumference of 10 inches, moving 3 or 4 inches down into the side of the mattress. From the viewpoint, I could see her glancing out the shattered window to what must have been her view of the approaching police and ambulance. Images 97 through 102 were her perspective, the blue light of morning silhouetting the officers pacing in the shattered glass. It was a miracle she was alive. I snapped over 30 photos of her belongings scattered around the time-worn orange carpet. Over by the door, I photographed a set of luggage leaking thin, uneven stuffing from holes left by escaping bullets. Many of the projectiles were embedded in the walls and in the cheap wooden bed frames and the dressers. The handles of the luggage were BLOODY, as were some clothes lying next to an empty briefcase. Photo 145 was the briefcase with its yellow crime scene marker M for miscellaneous. When I moved toward it, I could see there was a scatter of white dusting the corner, but the DRUGs were gone except for what had escaped through a bullet hole. I took a photograph and called one of the offices. Hey, did you see this over here? Garcia looked my way, his face pressed against his phone. One officer dropped another yellow marker on the site, N1, narcotics. I pressed my finger down, sending a flash around the room. I could smell Garcia approaching. Hear his breathing right behind me. He eyed the new evidence, never dropping the phone from his ear. Maybe more than just a drive-by, Detective Garcia, I said. He ignored me. There were BLOODY footprints, about 100 bullet holes, bloody shoe prints, razor blades, casings, cigarette butts, shredded photographs, mirrors and straws, shattered beer bottles, and countless other things that weren't even distinguishable. 430 photographs later, I walked out of the lonely hotel room trying to clear my throat of the heavy iron taste. An investigator stopped me, pulling at my coat. "Miss Totochini, right?" He extended his hand. "Yes, Rita." His grasp was firm and his hand warm. "I'm Lieutenant DeClane from Internal Affairs." He handed me a card and pointed toward the scene. "GANG activity?" DeClane was a little over 6 feet tall, had dark hair and a serious face. He wore a nice suit, but not too nice, just enough to say he had taste, but not enough to make him look full of himself. "Internal Affairs?" I asked. "Are you lost?" Like clockwork, my phone rang. "Office." I silenced it. "I'm sorry, but I have another scene to go to. I hope you'll excuse me." I turned away, but he grabbed my shoulder. "Do you think she's going to be okay? The victim, I mean." He continued to follow me. As I put my bag and gear into the car, I saw her, the victim, thin and confused, still dressed in her nightgown. I knew the answer then. "We've been trying to talk to her for weeks. She only replied to us yesterday morning." DeClane turned to see what I was looking at. "I don't think she's going to make it, sir," I replied. The poor woman was sitting shotgun next to me before I had a chance to blink. Her ghost was in shock, pulling at her blood-soaked holy nightgown. "How do you know?" He leaned against my car. "I just know." My phone began to ring again. I had to take it. "We've got another one over here. You close?" I could hear Samuels chewing gum. "What is it?" I kept my eye on DeClane's suit. He kept his eye on me. "Rollover fatality involving a police officer, eastbound I-40, at the interchange about 5 minutes from where you are now." "I'm en route." I hung up and looked at DeClane this time, meeting his eyes. "Sorry I couldn't have been more help." He was still staring at me as I pulled away from the scene. "Does this mean I'm dead? Just like that?" the woman's ghost asked. I'm afraid so." "I weaved in and out of traffic. I wasn't ready," she said, then disintegrated into my passenger seat. 7:45 a.m. I-40 westbound at the interchange, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Fatal accident involving an officer. I drove onto the scene about 5 minutes later and grabbed a hardened granola bar from my glove compartment. A small red sedan was on its roof, most of the top of the car crushed into the dust, hay, and debris that usually sat in roadway medians. The police had already covered the left side of the vehicle with a white sheet. The front end was mangled, the metal pushed up into the leaking engine. The smell of hot oil antifreeze was fresh. The approaching traffic had almost come to a standstill as death-curious drivers wove through the bits of car on the asphalt. I spotted a few familiar faces, shook their hands, and asked about the scene. It looked like the victim, another woman, had become distracted and veered off the road at a high rate of speed. But they were unsure how the other vehicle, a city vehicle, and off-duty officer had been involved. My first shot was taken from the back bumper of the idling ambulance, as high as I could get from the still hectic scene. Judging from the marks left on the road, she had traveled quite a distance after initial loss of control. I lowered myself from the ambulance and walked slowly up the road to look at the tracks, then snapped a few more establishing shots of the scene. A deep black skid mark was shaved into the asphalt on the left side of the road. The metal of the rims had sparked against the black surface, leaving a huge gouge. I snapped a photo from that point. The car had to have flown into the median at 70 to 80 miles an hour, flipping and landing on its roof. The woman had no chance. She must have unalived on impact while desperately trying to gain control. The driver of the city vehicle had only minor injuries, a cut above the eye and a grid of cuts and punctures from the glass. We took pictures of him on the scene. Detective Burns from the Vice Unit in Albuquerque was a 15-year veteran of the force whom I'd only met 3 or 4 times. He seemed perturbed that I was taking pictures of him and asked me repeatedly about the driver of the red sedan. Is she alive? He kept asking. Sir, I don't know. I'm just taking pictures. Turn, please. His hands had several scars and bruises around his knuckles. When I had him show me his arms, he had 2 parallel healing cuts right off the cuff of his sleeves, one on each arm. He turned them over, embarrassed. I pretended not to see them. What happened to your knuckles? That didn't happen today. I kept shooting pictures. I could feel him looking at me, but he never did answer. By the time I was done, they were already pulling him away from the ER. Detective Burns' car was pretty banged up in the back, like he had been rear-ended violently. The front looked pristine. On the right side, the mirror was torn off and there was red paint on the door. I pulled out some tape and framed the red flecks. It was weird that they were on the side, especially if he was rear-ended. How would that happen? It wouldn't. I must have snapped upward on 100 photos before I made my way toward the red sedan. The coroner had been there 15 minutes and was getting antsy, chain smoking beside the highway. The officers had built a small box barrier around the car with white sheets, the door hung open, a female body pouring from its insides. Her torso had been crushed under the car's weight and her legs pinned beneath the dashboard. Her arms were visibly broken. One delicate hand gripped the wheel. The body leaned to the left, resting uncomfortably against the front seat. I began to snap pictures of her, hoping there was no small child out there wondering where their mother was. I knew that someone out there loved this woman. Now her vessel was empty and silence still buckled into reality. I looked into the viewfinder of my camera and framed her body. The afternoon light had come in from the opposite window and created a strange halo around her head. Small trails of blood had soaked her light brown hair into a hard, thin sheath, turning it a darkened black. It had also created a murky and permanent seal to her eyes, glued shut by once vital fluid. I snapped a flutter of 8 or 10 photos until the sounds of fists hitting the hood pulled on my attention. Did you see that fucker cut me off? Okay, maybe I cut him off in town, but I didn't mean to, you know what I mean? Well, he followed me here, racing up on me, flipping me off. She kicked the dirt, unaware that she was no longer a physical presence. As she moved closer, she stopped to look at herself, the self belted in the car. Then she looked at me and saw me looking at her. She immediately came toward me like a rush of hot wind, her feet not touching the ground. Her face was so close to mine that I could feel her heat and rage. I hadn't let anyone, unalive or alive, that close to me in months. I tried to pretend that I didn't notice her, but I couldn't help but step back. Her presence was powerful. I caught my foot on the edge of the asphalt and fell to the ground, dropping the camera in the dirt. Are you okay? Said a young officer. What happened? He extended his hand to help me off the ground. The victim stood there looking at me, her chest heaving in panic. Can you see me? Can't you? I tried to pretend I didn't hear her. Hey, are you okay? The young officer asked again. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm fine. I lied. I'm just tired, punchy. I guess I didn't see the ridge there. By then, the investigators, the other officers, even the tow guy had begun to stare at me. Hope all the pictures are okay. An officer handed me my camera. He stared at me strangely and feigned a smile. I grabbed the dusty strap and looked at the back of my camera. It still worked. I could see the photos were there. They're fine, I stammered. The heat rushed toward me again. She was there in my face, trying to make eye contact. I tried my best to stare straight ahead as if there were full and unlimited portal to the world right at her head center. Her voice was loud and powerful. I know you can see me. I know you can. Tell them. Tell them what happened. Tell them that this guy won't take no for an answer. We dated for like 5 months and I broke it off a month ago. And he won't leave me alone. He wanted me to unalive. She screamed at me with such a force that I know I must have jumped, startled from everyone else saw as silence. I turned to see the young officer staring at me, waiting to see what I was going to do next. Officer, I think I've taken enough. Thanks for your help. I walked away from the scene, pulling up the collar of my coat, the ghost trail right behind me. Did you hear what I said to you? Listen, lady, I know you can hear me. I know you can see me standing right here in front of you. Why won't you tell them? Why won't you tell them what I said? She followed me all the way, forcing me to look her in the eyes. I walked through her 4 times before I made it to my car, where I closed the door and sat in silence. I could see her standing at my window through the corner of my eye, but I didn't make eye contact. She bent down to stare at me and banged on my window. The coroner walked by too, following me with his eyes, a look of concern on his face. What do you want me to tell them? I started the engine. That this woman's ghost is telling me the officer ran her off the road? She seemed surprised that I responded, then continued to bang at the windows. Please tell them. I don't care what you do. Just tell them what I said. Talk to me again. Tell me you hear me. I hear you, ma'am, I said. It will all be in my report and in the photographs. I pulled away as fast as I could. When I looked in the mirror, she was gone. I prayed that she would stay away. My phone buzzed on the seat voicemail. I pulled over on the side of the road and looked through the photographs. The call could wait. The 38th image confirmed exactly what the woman said. The scrape of red paint flecks along the left panels and the doors of the officer's vehicle, just like he'd run a red vehicle off the road. The phone buzzed again. The voicemail. I had to listen. Rita, I know you're on scene right now, but you're going to need to hang in there a few more hours. I hung up without letting the message finish, or 4 or 5 patrol cars whirred past me, their lights ablaze. The phone jumped in my lap. Office. I didn't know where those cars were headed, but I knew I was probably going to follow them. Chapter 12. Grandma didn't believe me when I said that Judith was gone. I could see it in her face. We drove home without a word, and we stayed that way for the rest of the night. There were times when you could talk to Grandma and get her to smile, and there were other times you could see me and feel that she needed to be left alone. I sat at the table and watched Grandma make gravy and corn on the stove. It was my favorite. The house was quiet that night. We wiped our faces and brushed our teeth in the heat of silence. When I woke up the next day, Grandma was already at the table having coffee. She smiled and pulled me toward her. Rita, she said, pressing into my arms. You have to help me. I nodded. I would do anything she asked of me. I'm going to have to take a trip, and I can't really tell you about it yet, but I will. Do you understand? I shook my head and smiled. Grandma hugged me so hard I felt like my bones might snap. My time with Judith had finally broken Grandma. Her insides were in panic. She felt alone and trapped. She wanted me to stay with her, but she knew she had to get me out. Mr. Bitzilli is going to watch you over the weekend. I want you to help him with whatever he needs. If he asks you to do something, you need to do what he asks. She continued to squeeze my arms. Don't worry, I'll be back to get you. Did I do something bad? I felt a lump rise in my throat. I hadn't meant to hurt Grandma when I was talking to Judith. I was lonely, that was all. Now I was gonna have to spend the whole weekend with the medicine man. No, Wet. She hugged me again. You're doing your best. She touched her camera box, which was sitting on the table. I'm gonna leave this with you. It's yours now. She put the black plastic envelope in the box and grabbed the sides of my face. As she embraced me, I could feel a bounce in her shoulder as she cried. She dropped me the box and my little suitcase off before the noon sun burned the land yellow. Mr. Bittilli and I watched Grandma's truck turn onto the highway and drive into the distance. Mr. Bittilli smiled wide. Come on, I made some lime Kool-Aid. The screen door slammed behind him, wood against wood. I watched over a rooftop the 3 branches until Grandma's truck was completely out of sight. As I moved inside, I saw Mr. Bittilli's grandson sitting on the worn couch, his face shiny and wet, his feet hanging bare over the edge of the cushion. I sat next to him and watched cartoons as the summer heat began to build through the house. What's in the box? He pointed to the camera box on my lap. Nothing yet, I answered. Mr. Bittilli needs lots of help. It was only the 3 of us, Mr. Bittilli, his always quiet 10-year-old grandson Travis, and me. By the time the sun was settling, we had helped him stack healthy pile of wood along the front of his hogan and filled all 4 of his water tanks over at the well. We watched the sunset deep with orange and red over the valley in Tohatchi with plastic mugs of green Kool-Aid in our grips. Late that night, we heard the cries of a woman outside the front door of Mr. Bittilli's house. His shoes scuffled toward the door in the darkness as Travis and I rose from our blankets. The woman was hysterical, her breathing skipping as she spoke rapid Navajo. We sat silently on the couch as Mr. Bittilli put his arm around the woman and led her into the hogan. The 2 of us tiptoed to the doorway and spied. Her name was Rosemary Nez. That much I understood. She cried hard. I had no idea what was going on in the conversation. I just watched their faces and knew their words were full of sadness and evil. Do you know what they're saying? I whispered. Travis looked disgusted. Her son is missing. He moved close to my ear. He's been doing drugs and drinking, and he hasn't come home in a few days. The woman gripped Mr. Bittilli's hands and continued. She wants my grandpa to pray for him. She is saying she has nothing to give him. Travis, Mr. Bittilli's call made us both jump. Travis rushed through the door in his pajamas. You 2 go get me some wood. We did as we were told and watched him build a fire. We sat on the porch and listened to Mr. Bittilli sing into the sky. There was a stark white moon out that lit up the land for miles. The heat had finally gone to sleep and nothing moved but the sound of his prayers. Travis broke the silence. How come you can't talk Navajo? I just never learned how. Doesn't your grandma talk Navajo to you? He looked at me out of the corner of his eye. Not all the time, not like your grandpa talks to you. You're lucky. In the distance, I could see only a shadow of movement deep in the rabbit brush, but I was certain it wasn't an animal. It stopped and I listened. Mr. Bittilli's voice lingered through the canyon. I hope that Grandpa's singing helps to find her son. Travis walked back into the house. I had no idea what the woman's son looked like, but someone was standing in the darkness. I ran back into the house and I closed the door. Are you okay? Travis said. The television flashed on his face. I just need to come inside, I explained, and joined him in the living room, watching the silent images flicker. There was a violent bang shaking the windows and sending Travis and me running into the kitchen. It sounded like someone had thrown a brick at the door. Are you 2 okay? Mr. Bittilli came into the room. We couldn't talk or move, only stared at the door waiting for the next thump to ring out, but nothing happened. Mr. Bittilli opened it wide. Nothing. We looked out into the darkness with Rosemary Nez by our side, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Bittilli sent us to our beds on the couch. A short while later, I heard Mr. Bittilli take Rosemary to her car, then trudge back up his porch steps. When he stopped to look at us, I pretended to sleep. He shuffled to his room and the whole house went black, helping me to close my eyes and rest. In the morning, I woke before everyone else. I knew that Mrs. Ned's son was unalived. I dreamed about him all night. I dreamed about his car and the sound of laughter. It had been an accident. He and two girls had gone up the cliffs above Truska Lake and drank until they could barely stand. As the two girls slept off their drink in the back seat, Deswood Nez made his way to the edge to look out into the darkened water. Then he slipped. His body flipped and turned on the rocks and trees below until he came to a stop at the bottom, 100 feet from his car and his companions. When the two girls woke up the next morning and found Deswood gone, they figured he had walked home. They did the same. He was still lying down there, a slight smile on his face. I walked outside into the crisp air before the highway began to move, before all the reservation dogs began to howl and chatter about their nights beneath the scarce, barren streetlights. I lingered across the street from Mr. Bittilli's house, looking out into the bushes and grass that lined the field, feeling the pull of the leaves on my finger. "Rita," Mr. Bittilli called out, "what are you doing over there? Get back over here." I ran back to see Mr. Bittilli get down on one knee and look straight into my eyes. "Rita, you can't just run off like that without telling me where you're going." He squeezed my hand. "I promised your grandma that I would take care of you." We walked hand in hand to the steps and sat down. "I think I saw him, Mr. Bittilli," I said. I pointed out the field. "His shadow was standing out there last night while you were singing." "Whose shadow?" I could feel his blood coursing through his fingers as he held onto my hand. "Mrs. Ned's son. He's unalived, you know." Mr. Bittilli released my hand. "You don't know that, Rita." Mr. Bittilli stared out into the empty field. "You shouldn't say that kind of thing." "It's true," I said. "He visited my dreams last night and told me right where he is." "Rita," Mr. Bittilli was angry now. "You can't lie about this. Mrs. Nez is so worried about her son. How would you feel if your grandma went missing? Wouldn't you want to find her?" "I'm not lying." I began to cry. I thought of missing my grandma filled me with anxiety. He fell right by the lake. He's still there." I could feel Mr. Bittilli shaking. He stood up and took my hand once again, walking us to the house, into the kitchen, where he grabbed the phone and dialed. Travis couldn't stop staring at me as Mr. Bittilli called the police over to the house. We sat waiting for them in the kitchen, silent except for the occasional pop from the coffee pot. When they pulled into the driveway, they spoke to Mr. Bittilli from their cruiser windows. I strained to hear what they were talking about. "It's true what they say about you, isn't it?" Travis said. I didn't answer. "People say that you see ghosts and things. Is that true?" Travis kept at it. "It doesn't scare me, you know. You have some kind of special gift like Grandpa. You just know things." I stayed silent. It was only my second day away from my grandma, and I couldn't stop thinking of her leaving me here. Like my mom left me, like Gloria left me, to live out my days with Mr. Bittilli and his grandson. I was terrified. Mr. Bittilli came into the room and sat down with me and Travis. "The police are going down to the lake to look for Deswood," he said. "They will let us know what they find after they talk to Mrs. Nez." He never took his eyes off me, but it wasn't the look of mistrust. He was worried about me. "Do you promise me that you're telling me the truth, Rita?" I could feel tears on my face. I couldn't control them. "You need to rest." He rose to his feet and led me to the couch. "If you're worried about Grandma, I'm sure she is fine. She will be back here tomorrow. You'll see." I lay down on the couch and watched the flicker of the television, but sleep wouldn't come to offer its comfort. Instead, I cried after my grandma. I knew that it wasn't good to cry after people, but it came like a flood. Mr. Batili and Travis sat and watched television with me, but no one spoke. After Travis drifted off to sleep, Mr. Batili sat on the floor by me next to his boots. Did your grandma tell you where she was going? No, I said, but I don't think she can take care of me anymore. He looked surprised at my answer. Why do you think that, Rita? Because I can feel it. I guess you're right. In a way, your grandma went to help your mother settle into a place for the both of you. It's time that your mother took responsibility for you. I couldn't say a word. We will always be here for you, Rita. He looked in my eyes. This place will always be here for you, a safe place. Mr. Batili stopped. The two of us are connected. I think you were just meant to do something more. We sat in silence as Johnny Carson pushed through his curtain. Mr. Batili was right. Maybe we didn't see things in the same way or use our gifts in the same way, but there was a bigger connection between us, as if we sometimes shared the same eye. On the day my grandma was set to return from her travels, I went to Mr. Batili's closet and taped some photo paper into Grandma's box camera. I told Mr. Batili and Travis that I was going to take their picture, but they didn't believe me. We're going to take our picture with that box, Travis asked. That's crazy. Reluctantly, the two of them sat on the porch with Travis on the bottom step between his grandfather's knees. I pointed the small hole at them. Watch, I said. I pulled the tape from the front box. They chuckled. Don't move, I said. Stay very still. They looked perfect. Mr. Batili with his big overalls and well-worn moccasins, and Travis in holey jeans, his skinny brown legs popping out. I pushed the tape back into place and ran back to Mr. Batili's closet. When I came out, the police were in the driveway. Travis and I watched the officer advance toward us. He was coming to tell us what I already knew. Yat Mr. Batili, the officer said. He took off his hat and wiped his brow. I just came by to let you know that we found Deswood Naz yesterday. We wanted to thank you for your help. I'm sorry to hear that he left us, Mr. Batili said, and he shook his head. Thank you for coming by to tell us. We all watched the young officer walk back to his car and pull away. Travis and Mr. Batili looked at me. There was nothing else said. Chapter 13, 4:34 p.m. 11271, Juniper Hills, possible unaliving suicide. The scene had been secured by the time I had arrived. I left my car as close as I could, parking with the yellow tape up against my hood. I wasn't looking forward to see what we would find inside. The radio scratched through. Mobile unit en route eastbound on tramway from I-25. I rested my bag on my shoulder and walked under the tape. The house was beautiful. It was one of those homes that sat perched on top of the mountain, their mirrored glass sending prisms down the rest of us. Photo 1 was of the outside, photo 2 the house number, and 3 the entire foyer was just as I saw it, with high, wide ceilings and white periwinkle accents. As I walked into the front door, I could smell the faint hint of gunfire and potpourri. Silver frames covered every available piece of wall on the right side. Baby pictures, soccer games, family get-togethers, a young couple standing next to each other. The man was recognizable immediately. Judge Harrison Winters was a nice enough man. I had met him a few times at police fundraisers and when I had to testify in court. He always seemed as uninterested as I was to be at those events. About a month earlier, they caught the judge high as a kite and passed out on the freeway with a very young woman. They found a huge amount of Cocaine, in the car, and 2 open bottles of 18-year-old scotch. The girl, a 16-year-old girl prostitute, had been reported missing in Arizona. He was toast. I took 3 more steps inside and saw Judge Winter's wife lying on the floor, a deep and blackened hole right in the center of her head. Her face was surprised, her eyes wide open, and her lips purple under the uneven lipstick still left on top. The wound measured about 2 inches in the widest areas, a starlight tear and burn, telling us that the gun must have been right up to her head. We found and photographed P1. The slug had passed through a wet sponge, bounced off the counter, and embedded itself into the wall behind the sink. There was an oval spray of blood on the window above the sink and the ceiling. Her head was in a pool of black, the blood dried around her face. I took 64 pictures in the front room. Mrs. Winters, the blood-splattered mail in her hand, the bloody handprints on the paperwork on the table. Even her dog was unalive, bloody and mangled by the sink. I photographed the shell casings, 3 in all, shimmering next to 2 or 3 breadcrumbs and a collection of weary dog hairs, A45. The living room was untouched and spotless. Every glass and coaster was in its place. The television still on, but the volume muted. Detective Macy sat on the head of the stairs, taking off his gloves. Macy was still a youngster, maybe 3 or 4 years on the force, and he had already made detective an impressive feat. "Hey, Macy," I extended my hand. "You got a look upstairs yet?" "Yes," Macy said, "and nothing else. Whatever was up there was horrible." I walked up to the steps, snapping pictures as I went up there. Photo 87 was a bloody handprint at the top of the stairs. The fingers were fat and strong, the lines perfectly distinguishable. Photo 89 was of another handprint at the door of the nursery. Just as I stepped inside, I heard the baby's keening cry, the kind babies use after they got a shot or hit their heads. But there was no baby in that room, at least not one that was alive. Another officer stood at the door and turned when he saw me, refusing to even look me in the eye. The crying continued, louder and louder, as I walked to the crib to the corner. The giraffe sheets were covered in blood, as was most of the bedding and stuffed animals around the crib. The gunshot had gone right through the little girl at the base of her neck and out through the bottom of the crib. Photos 90 through 150 captured the screen in the room, the blankets, the wound, and the blood that had pooled beneath the crib. I took every photo with a lump at my throat. When OMI came to take her body, we photographed her face. The bullet had passed through her right cheek, leaving a bloom of skin and blood right below her eye. We all watched in silence as they took her little body away. Her crying remained a dull whine. I found the boy in his room, hiding in the closet, shot through the top of his head. He had fallen stiffly onto the toy-covered floor, his face in dirty clothes. I photographed him as he was. The blood splatter on the winter coats, his posters surrounding the portal of his closet door. I estimated he could not be more than 10 years old. He was an uncanny reflection of his mother in the kitchen. Even their wounds were the same. I guess he had probably heard what was happening downstairs and hidden only to be found and unalived. I photographed the boy in his room for over an hour. The space, despite 3 of us drawing diagrams, making reports, and taking pictures, was silent. I felt a tug at my coat. The boy. I couldn't help but look at him straight in the eyes. "He's not here. The one that shot us." He looked at me, devoid of emotion. He went in there and shot my dad too. I heard it. Come on, let me show you. He pulled my arm so hard I thought people might notice. I couldn't believe I could feel him. Rita, are you okay? It was Angie. When I looked over at her, I felt the sensation of tears burning my cheek. Yes, I'm fine. Just a long day. A long, long day. Do you need a break? She squinted at me. I felt a push of air at my arm, the boy's ceaselessness. No, I need to finish up here. What time is it anyway? It's 7. What time did you get here? Angie kept writing in her report. About 4:30. Just one more room. I walked toward Winter's home office. Detective Garcia and Vargas stepped out past Angie and me at the doorway. They reviewed the diagram while Garcia scribbled on his report. So sad to see it happen this way. Garcia shook his head. I would never have expected an unaliving suicide from Judge Winters. He moved around the desk and stared at the back of the Judge Winters' open head wound. Judge Winters sat at his desk, his eyes cloudy and fixed on the ceiling. There was some slight stripling and blackening around the wound, with a thick line of blood trickling from the hole in his temple. The exit wound was on his cheek. On the wall behind him, tissue, hair, and skin covered his Juris Doctor and other diplomas. His hands hung at his sides, and his .45 lay on the floor beside him. We found the slug embedded in the carpet under his desk. Image 285 was the wide shot of the room, and image 315 was Judge Winters' desk, covered with unspent .45 shells. As I pulled the camera up to my face, the little boy appeared at the left of my frame, his finger pointing toward the doorway. That's the one who was here. I turned around to see Garcia and his partner still scratching out the report, joined by half the evidence team. I felt an undulation of rage behind me and turned to see Judge Winters' dead, scowling face staring at me. The force of his hate hit me hard like a ball to my face, the orange flash and sting. See, Dad, see? She can see us. I stared at Judge Winters, dead and angry. Get out my house, he shouted. He moved right through my body, filling me with a sickness I've never explained before. I could feel his unaliving. I stumbled out of the office and down the stairwell, knocking a framed photo off the wall at the bottom. The glass shattered from the corner, breaking the frame into 2 even pieces. Rita! Angie reached for me. What's wrong, Rita? Are you okay? In the photo, the police chief and mayor stood on one side of Judge Winters, and Detective Garcia and another man, dressed in a tailored suit, stood on the other, all smiles and arms over shoulders. Help me. Irma's cold breath coiled around my neck, stiffening my neck and jaw and vibrating my skin. I'm not leaving you until you help me. My nose felt hot, my lips pulsed, and I felt the trickle on my lip. Blood, then blackness. Chapter 14. At my 17th birthday party, I saved the oblong box from Grandma to unwrap last. Maybe it was a watch, like something in silver and turquoise. I ripped the tape and paper back to find it. The Kodak Instamatic X35F came in a bright yellow box with a roll of Instamatic film and a long shimmering box of prisms, the flash. When I opened it, the instructions fell on my lap. I began to read them immediately, forgetting my birthday guest. The camera was a rectangle in brown and black, the back of it opening like a car door swinging wide. I opened the film packing, inhaling the strong aroma of fresh plastic and stale factory air, and snapped the cartridge into place. The shutter button was on the front of the camera on the right side of the lens. I peered through the viewfinder and watched as everyone, Grandma and Mom, Aunt Ruth, Travis, Mr. Bitzilli, and our neighbor, Mrs. Bitsy, and her dog looked at me, their faces wavy in the lens. I pressed the button. Rita is my favorite photographer, Mr. Bitzilli said. Everyone laughed. With the taste of cake and frosting still on my tongue, I walked the distance around my grandmother's house looking for snapshots with my camera. The late summer afternoon provided a flood of marigold and magenta onto the otherwise dry sandy ground of the reservation. Tohatchi framed everything in a sharp contrast of shades and color of time of the atmosphere. The yellow blossoms of Navajo tea stood stiffly swaying along my grandmother's fence line. I focused on my grandmother's perfect white house alongside the moving tea stalks and snapped another photo. From that point on, I took pictures of everything and everyone. It got to the point that my grandmother had to limit me to one roll per week. You are going to put your family into bankruptcy, Grandma would say. At first, I felt punished by my one roll limit, but soon I realized that this was the ultimate way to wait for the perfect shot. My only early photographs consisted of my usual reservation encounters, picking corn with my cousins, my grandma at her sewing machine, some man butchering a sheep, boiling fry bread in a hot black skillet. Eventually, I began to venture farther into the cliffs and canyons behind my grandma's house. The Cheska mountain range became the backdrop to hundreds of photographs as I searched and found Che, the horned toad, Miss Bitsy's wandering cows, and a few rusted cars from the 50s and 60s. I finally climbed to the top of the crested bluff near the highway and saw a dozen photographs emerging down below. I ran down the hill, the cuffs of my pants capturing sand by the handful. I came to a halt by the highway, a black cat, unalived only a few hours. He hadn't started to smell or get stiff. I could not even see blood until I moved closer. I looked up the road, spotting a dark snake of black where the car had tried to swerve. I stood over the cat and snapped a picture, the first in a roll of 24, make that 23 now. I caught his full and strong body, his fur deep black, darker than the highway, darker than anything I'd ever seen. His eyes were open and looked straight forward. I rested my head on the hot asphalt and caught his gaze. The highway rising behind me. 23, 22, 21. His tail had been flattened, his glossy fur matted and frayed at the edges of his injury. The camera flashed. 20, 19, 18. A dented brown pickup truck passed by, the inhabitants slowing down and watching me. I caught their faces. 17, 16, only 15 left. A delicate rain began to fall, neutralizing the heat of sand and asphalt, spreading a gilded and translucent hue over the land. I stared at the cat again. His sharp pearly fangs peered out from his open mouth. Click. 14, 13. I darted across the desolate highway and framed the cat again, this time in the beam of light from the approaching storm. Click. When my grandmother came back from town with a developed roll of film, I buzzed with excitement. I never knew whether the photos could come out until I could hold that waxy envelope in my hands and slip my finger beneath the fold to pull the sticky gum apart. This time my palms began to sweat as Grandma got them out of the truck. She was not happy. She slammed the door, then grabbed my face and stared in my eyes. Duh, Grandma said. No. She dumped the photos on her kitchen table and glared at me. The envelope had already been opened. Now we have to call the medicine man. Photo 14 sat on top. I could make out the dead cat's white fangs. From the kitchen, I could hear Grandma on the phone. She talked to Mr. Bittilli in Navajo, but they were talking about me. This much I knew. I also knew the visit to Mr. Bittilli would be a waste of time. I loved Mr. Bittilli, but his singing never made anything different. That night we sat on the dirt floor of Mr. Bittilli's hogan, listening to his raspy voice as he sang into the night air. Trails of sweet sagebrush smoke rose up from the floor, escaping through the hole in the ceiling. He blew his hot breath through the bone pipe, pressing my hair back, and continued to pray and sing for me. My grandma soon joined him in song. I wanted so badly to understand what they were saying, but my grandma didn't want me to know. She had once told me that the language would only get me in trouble. Suddenly, without any warning, Mr. Bittilli rubbed his chin on my head so hard that it hurt. The pipe echoed in my ears, and Mr. Bittilli spit bone, hair, and blood into his handkerchief. After a long day there in the Hogan, I didn't feel any different. I could feel the love and concern coming from the prayers, from the songs, but nothing had changed. I knew they still looked at me, wanting to know why I had this connection to dead things. For Mr. Bittilli and Grandma, that connection was the most dangerous thing possible. They were scared of the sickness that death could bring. After we left the Hogan, we went back to Mr. Bittilli's house, where I sat at the table with an overly sweet vanilla cookie while they lectured me about my pictures. Death is something that you need to leave alone, Rita. Don't touch dead things. Don't look at dead things. Mr. Bittilli glared at me out of the corner of his eye. And don't talk to dead things. And don't take pictures of dead things, my grandma added. You've been doing good, Mr. Bittilli looked at Grandma. All we're saying is that if you keep inviting dead things into your life, it could open the door. You never know what path a spirit has taken until they're in your head. Don't let them know that there is a door. Don't let them know that you are the key. They talked to me about what death leaves behind, the spirit, the essence. They cautioned me about evil that lives in the spirit. Like a cancer, a presence of terminal energy. Mr. Bittilli warned me over and over until it scared me. This must have been what Grandpa told me about. After the conversation, I escaped in the living room, where the lone bulb lit up all of Mr. Bittilli's football posters. Grandma followed me. Mr. Bittilli saw us look up at the posters in the red and white frames decorating his walls and blushed. The Cardinals are my team, he admitted, but they never win. Boo. I'm a Cardinals fan too. On the ride back home, I watched as my grandmother's Tettadine bag, her medicine pouch filled with corn pollen, and her crucifix dangled in the light of the late afternoon. She sat quietly, her rough hands grasping the steering wheel. I loved my grandmother. She didn't look or act like any grandmother I had ever met. When I went to friends' homes or saw other grandparents at school, they were always what you would expect a Navajo grandmother to look like. Other grandmothers dressed in velveteen and wore their hair in buns tied with wool, like in every book I'd seen about the Navajo people. They had sheep and lived in hogans, but not my grandmother. My grandmother wore her hair short and curled. Later, when it became sprinkled with gray, she would sometimes dye it to the shiniest jet black. Her hands were worn, but she took great care to keep them clean, her nails cut short and sanded perfectly. She made her own clothes from bolts of light cotton, dresses or nice pants and a blouse closed with silver pins. She learned how to sew in boarding school in Phoenix. Both she and my grandfather had gone to boarding school. One day while we were peeling potatoes at the kitchen table, she had told me all about it. The city was full of cars and people. Everything moved so fast. But in Phoenix at the boarding school, they taught us how to cook, to sew, how to take care of children. I learned how to read and write. I learned to act like a white person. But I also learned about other things, like how to build things, how to use a camera. I learned what it was like outside of the reservation. That is important. If you never leave, you never know how good your life can be. Sometimes I think it was a good thing that they took me away to school. Otherwise, I would be living in a hogan in the middle of nowhere with my sheep. I would rather be here with you. Grandma had a way of explaining things. I never interrupted her. I just let her talk. She had lived through a lot, each line in her face giving us a map of years and experience. She was incredibly strong. As we drove home from Mr. Bittilli's home in the rain that day, my grandmother said, when my mother unalived, I was only a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She had a terrible cough for months. When she was hot with fever, she coughed blood. My grandfather knew she was about to unalive. He explained to me in Navajo that she was going out to unalive. Then 2 young men, covered in ash and smudged with pine sap, came in and carried carried my pale mother out of the hogan. She smiled at me as she left and held on to my braid right up to the tip, then let it fall. I ran to the window and watched them take her to the fire they had lit in the distance. I stood there for hours. My little feet ached, but I didn't care. I didn't want my mother to leave. I cried after her. My father took me aside and scolded me. Crying after someone when they're dead is the worst thing anyone could do because it keeps them here in this world. They wouldn't want to pass on. My father feared death like he feared no other thing on this earth. But what was always confused me was that death was so evil. It was as if when we died, we went to hell. I didn't want my mom to go there, so I cried and cried to keep her here. I watched in the moonlight as my mom parted this world in the summer night. Every once in a while, the lightning from the storm lit up this canyon, and I could see the two strangers picked to guide my mother to death. As family, we're not allowed to be part of her passing. I remember when she died, as the sunrise bled into our door, the two men came into the hogan and washed the ash off their bodies. My father told us we were never to ever speak my mother's name again, but late at night my sister and I would talk about her as our father, your great-grandfather, slept. All of this is just something we believe, that death is evil, that it carries despair, or at least that's what we were taught to believe. That sickness my mother had killed a lot of our people, and I think it made us scared of death forever. I don't even know what to believe anymore. Grandma shook her head. We eased into a muddied, ruddled driveway, our tires rumbling in deep tracks as the moon was high in the sky. I could not help but think about the story my grandfather had just told. How cruel life could be, and death a crueler and more evil experience. I didn't like how Navajos thought of death, like a first-class ticket to hell, and even at that young age, I wondered about all of it. What was real? Who was telling me the truth? I love being there in my grandmother's house, the familiarity of green checkered curtains blowing gently in the breeze of early summer, the still warm tortilla sandwiched between the homemade pot holders. We would talk and talk about everything while country songs drowned from the speakers of our clock radio. Every day was like that with my grandmother. This was where I wanted to be forever, where I belonged, free from the press of civilization. Grandma had other plans. She prepared me for what was to come. It was time for me to move in with my mom. Grandma explained that I would return each June through August to be here among the tall, blooming stalks of Indian tea, to witness the invitations to late night singing beckoning from spray-painted roadway signs, and to spend the cool nights on the porch with grandmother. But Grandma encouraged me to stay with my mother. This is not where I want you to end up, she said. There is nothing here for you, but you're here. I will always be here, she would reply. You will not. I don't want you ending up like Gloria. I didn't trust that my mother could take care of me. After all, she had left me here and moved on with her life. She rarely visited. It was like Grandma had to remind her that I existed, and I'm doing that. Grandma had to remind my mother about her bad decisions. That night, my dream was touched by a freezing fear. I saw myself get up off the couch, my bare feet touching the stony linoleum. I walked to Grandma's door and pressed my face against the stained wood to check that she was still breathing, something that I had done since I learned about the miracle of the beating heart. Grandma had read me a book about the heart's chambers and the electricity of our own bodies, miraculous, but also something that could stop with a little warning. My grandmother's mortality was something I feared more than I approach of my own unaliving. In my dream, I could not hear her breathing. I let myself in. There she was, lying in her bed, not breathing. I grabbed her limp body and desperately tried to shake the life back into her veins, but she was gone. My body began to fade, my strength failing, my arms disappearing without nodding. Pieces of my teeth began to fall into my lap, and as I used my tongue to feel where they were coming from, I only pushed throughout faster and faster. As I disintegrated into nothing, I jolted from my sleep. My grandmother sat at my feet, staring at me like she had watched the whole thing unfold on a movie screen. She grabbed my hand and led us out into the morning. She took a softened satchel, a pocket of her light cotton dress. She spilled some of the bright yellow powder into my hand and into hers as she prayed softly in Navajo. She prayed for me and for my mother and for our future. We sprinkled the yellow corn pollen in our hair and in our mouths and distributed what was left in the air. She looked at me, smiled, and turned to walk back toward the house. I stayed behind and watched the last of the floating prayer catch the beams of the rising sun.